Hi everyone and welcome to lesson 2 of unit 43, more trigonometry. In lesson 1 we started to look at the graphs of sine and cosine and tangent, and we saw how these were able to go beyond 90 degrees, which is kind of what we'd seen so far when we were doing calculator stuff with SOHCAHTOA. And by doing that we can now start to investigate a little bit more about what happens when we start to go outside of right angle triangles. So this first lesson on right angled triangle stuff is all about the sine rule. In terms of where it fits into our topic area, we've looked at graphs a little bit, and we're just going to do this bit here. So we're going to look at calculating using the sine rule, and we're going to find some missing sides and missing angles, a bit like we did with SOHCAHTOA. But again, I can't stress this enough, this is for non-right angled triangles. So if you've got any kind of triangle now it doesn't have to be right angled. You might think that this one up here is, but we don't know. There's no square on it to say. So what we can say is that we can use a very interesting property. As long as we label it up properly, we can use one of these two formulas here. So when I talk about labeling it up properly, what I'm talking about is our little letters on the sides, and they have to be opposite the big letter that we use for the angle. So this here, this angle, we're going to call big A, and the side opposite is little a. And our angle up here is big B, and the side on the opposite is little b, and similarly with our C's. Now we're only ever going to use two pairs of these letters. So the fact that we can use it with any of them is fine, but like I say, we're only ever going to use two. So don't worry about the fact that there being three things equal to each other. We're only ever going to use two of them. So this is the same as this. It's just that we use this version if we're finding an angle with the angle on the top, and this version if we're using it to find a missing side with the side on the top. And at this point, if you've not already paused the video and started to write this down, I absolutely recommend you do so. So this is our sine rule, it says up here. This is for finding an angle, this is for finding a side. So pause it, make sure you got this bit written down because we're going to use this later. Okay, so let's do an example. Now, this is all going to be using your calculator, so you need your calculator out to do this. The question says, find the length of the side marked A and give your answer correct to three significant figures. Now, what's interesting is we've got this opposite situation. We've got an angle and a side on the opposites, and we've got a missing side and an angle, again, on opposites. So the first thing we do is we write down our sine rule. We're not going to write all three parts. We're just going to do the A and the B bit. So then we can start to substitute in our numbers. So our A stays as A. The thing that's opposite it is sine 38. Now you'll remember that sine 38 is just a number on our calculator. And B is 9.4, and the angle opposite is sine 68. And again, you'll see all of these are using sine. This is because it's the sine rule. Next step is we just want A. So it was being divided by sine 38. I'm going to move that across, make it times, and this is something I can now just type in my calculator. Be careful that when you type it in that you do have this bit as a fraction and then multiplied by sine 38. Make sure that your display looks like this, otherwise you're going to end up with some problems. We're going to get an answer on our calculator. We look back at the question, it says we want it to three significant figures, so finally we need to do a bit of rounding. And it's as simple as this. So although it seems like it's kind of advanced trigonometry, it really isn't. It's a case of labeling your triangle up properly first, substituting some numbers in, and letting your calculator do the work. Let's have another example where this time we're going to find a missing angle. So if we've been asked this time to find the acute angle marked B and give your answer correct to one decimal place, we've got, again, opposites and opposites. So we're going to write down our sine rule first. This time we're doing it the other way around. We're putting our angles on the top and our sides on the bottom. It just makes it a little bit easier for when we're rearranging to find the angle. Next step, substitute your numbers in. So A we're saying is 72. So sin 72 over little a, 9.8. This side here, 8.1, is our little b, and we're finding the angle. So we're leaving it as sine b to start with. Next step, this 8.1, we're moving across to the other side. So now we've got something I can type in our calculator. If I type all this in, I'm going to get 0.7860 and some other numbers. And this is what sine b is equal to. Now we want b, so we're going to have to undo the sign. To do that, we're going to do sine to the -1. That's the inverse of sine, it undoes sine. So we do that, we're going to get our answer. And again, we want it to 1 decimal place. So we need to do a little bit of rounding as well. But b is 51.8 degrees. Okay, so you've seen an example of finding a missing side. You've seen an example of finding a missing angle. I would recommend that you start to write these down so that you've got an example that you can follow. And next we're going to have a go at some questions. So on the class charts work that I've set, there's a worksheet. I want you to download that, have a go at it now. Then you can pick the questions back up again in a second, pick the video back up in a second where the answers will be. So you need to pause it to this point, have a go, and then you can mark it. So here are the answers for the worksheet that you should have done so far. Let's keep going. So again, any questions, let me know and I can go through those with you individually. We're going to do sort of push on a little bit now. We're just going to do one more example of a more difficult question, so that if then when you go on to do some of these in Dr. Frost, you sort of used to the sorts of things that you might be expected to see. Here we have a picture of a house. We've got a couple of people. It says the angle of elevation of the top of a building measured from point A is 25 degrees. Point B, 50 meters closer to the building, the angle of elevation is 35. Calculate the height of the building. So we've got some information, but I can't see any triangles yet. So I suggest the first thing we start to do is draw out a sketch so we can see. So we've got these two angles of elevation now. Make sure that you very carefully label up which one's which. Next step, we need to start thinking about if I know any more information. Well, it did say that this was 15. Okay, so that's good. What else do we know? Well, we're trying to work out this height here. So what we can do is start to think about any other angles or any other information that might help us do this. So first of all, let's think about the angle TDA. I've got 35 degrees here. Angles on a straight line must be that this bit is 145. Okay, fair enough. Is this more helpful? Well, it kind of is, because now I've got two angles. So if I've got two angles, then I must also know this angle up here as well, which is remembering that triangles add up to 180. Okay, next step, we can now start to use our sine rule. We've got T to D, so this opposite to this is equal to 15 opposite this. Okay, and we're still not finding out this height, but we can't find that height out yet because we don't know the length of this side. And if we find the length of that side, we can use normal SOHCAHTOA type trig in a second. So using our sine rule, we can work out the length T to D is 36.5 meters. And if we know that that's 36.5 meters, we can now start to do some extra work to find TB. So we've got 36.5 here, sine 35 is TB over this. This is our normal SOHCAHTOA stuff. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Rearrange it and we can work out the height of the building. So once we start getting more and more confident with using sine rule, we'll start seeing it applied in more and more contexts. Okay, so last thing that I wanted to say was, if you've had a go at the worksheet, fantastic. What I would suggest that you do next is have a look at some of the exam style questions on Dr. Frost Maths, see how you get on with those. Don't worry if you're finding those particularly difficult. That's because they're GCSE questions and you're learning this by yourself. As long as you've understood the video and you've had a go at the worksheet, The Dr. Frost stuff will come over time. Don't worry if you're not getting it just yet. It's, you're doing whatever you're doing. If you're watching the video, you're working at it by yourself, you're doing a great job. So continue to do that. And if you get stuck on anything, let me know. Thanks a lot. Bye.